One morning, a frail, elderly woman stood before me in the courtroom. Her hands trembled as she held her ticket, and her voice carried the weary tone of someone who had fought too many silent battles in her lifetime. She wasn't just a defendant facing a minor infraction, she was a human soul weighed down by burdens unseen. Before I take you further into this story, let me pause for one request. If you believe in compassion, in stories that reveal the humanity behind every headline, then please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Comment below with your thoughts because your voice matters in keeping these lessons alive. Now, back to that moment. The charge was ordinary. A simple parking violation. But life rarely fits neatly into categories of ordinary or extraordinary. Life has a way of disguising its most powerful truths behind the most common events. I asked her gently why she had left her car unattended that morning, why she hadn't fed the meter. Her eyes met mine, and in that instant, I felt the room itself grow still, as if time wanted to honor what she was about to say. "Judge," she began, her voice shaking. "I wasn't thinking about the meter. I was taking my daughter to the
hospital. She's battling cancer. I just forgot everything else." The words landed not as an excuse, but as a confession of pain. The entire courtroom seemed to inhale together, the laughter and chatter of the waiting crowd evaporating into silence.
In that moment, the law before me was clear, but so was something greater. The presence of human suffering, the kind that no statute can measure. I looked at this woman, and I did not see a violator of city rules. I saw a mother, a protector, a warrior who was walking through fire for the sake of her child, and I knew what had to be done. I dismissed the case, but I didn't just dismiss it quietly. I spoke directly to her heart, because sometimes the power of a decision is not in the ruling, but in the message it carries. "Ma'am," I told her, "take care of your daughter. That is your duty now. The city can wait, the meter can wait, but her life cannot." Her lips trembled as tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "Thank you," again and again, but what she didn't realize was that it was I who was grateful. Grateful because she had reminded me of a truth I never want my juniors, those who follow
me in this profession, to forget. The law may be written in books, but humanity is written in our hearts. And sometimes true justice is not in punishment, but in mercy. That day, I went home with a heavier heart, but also with a deeper conviction.
People often ask me what the law is meant to do. They expect me to say, to punish wrongdoing or to enforce order. Those are correct in their own way. But the truth is larger than that. The law is not just about order. It is about people. It is about remembering that behind every ticket, every case file, every docket number, there is a human being with a story we may never fully know. That woman was not simply case number 27 on the morning docket. She was a mother holding on to her daughter's life with everything she had. And I realized something. I had been given a rare privilege. I had been entrusted with the responsibility to see beyond the ink on the page, beyond the printed violation, and into the soul standing before me. My decision didn't heal her daughter's cancer. It didn't erase her suffering, but perhaps it gave her one thing the law alone could not: dignity. And in a world that often strips people of dignity, perhaps that is the greatest gift a judge can give. I share this story because I want the young judges, lawyers, and public servants of tomorrow to remember this. Justice is not always about the scales. Sometimes justice is about the heart. If you rely only on the book, you will enforce the letter of the law. But if you remember the human being before you, you will enforce the spirit of justice. And there is a difference. The book may correct mistakes, but compassion heals lives. So when you sit in the chair I have sat in, when you wear the robe I have worn, I ask you to remember this. Mercy is not weakness. Mercy is not neglect. Mercy is the courage to say that sometimes the law must bend, not to break order, but to serve humanity. That is the lesson the frail woman left me with that day. She walked out of my courtroom lighter than she came in, but I walked out heavier, with responsibility, with reflection, with the unshakable truth that my role was not only to serve the law, but to serve humanity. And that, dear listener, is the beginning of the story I carry with me into every courtroom, every decision, and every reflection on what justice truly means. When I think back to that morning with the frail woman, I often realize how easily her case could have been lost in the shuffle. To many, it was nothing more than a line on the docket, a routine violation that could be dealt with in 60 seconds. But that day taught me something that still echoes in my heart. No case is small if it involves a human soul. And perhaps that is where I see the greatest danger for young judges and lawyers. The danger is not in making mistakes, nor in being too lenient or too strict. The danger is in becoming numb to the faces, the voices, the stories that stand before you. Because once you become numb, you stop seeing people and start seeing only files. I remember another case, one that has stayed with me almost as vividly. A young boy, barely old enough to drive, stood in front of me. His ticket was for speeding, an offense that can have serious consequences. The prosecutor laid out the fact. He had exceeded the limit, and there was no disputing it. The law was, once again, clear, but when I asked the boy why he was speeding, his answer came with a trembling honesty that pierced the air. "My dad, sir," he said.
He works nights. He called me because he was sick. I just wanted to get to him quickly. Now, to some, that might sound like a simple excuse, but when I looked at the boy, I didn't just see guilt. I saw urgency. I saw the love of a
son for his father. And in that moment, I asked myself not only what the law demanded, but what justice required. Yes, he had broken the speed limit. But was he reckless, or was he desperate to be there for someone he loved? The answer shaped my ruling. I reduced his fine, but more importantly, I spoke to him, not as a judge, but as an elder. "Young man," I told him, "your instinct to care for your father is admirable, but you must understand this. Sometimes love can push us to act in ways that are dangerous, not just to ourselves, but to others. If you truly love your father, then keep yourself safe, because he needs you alive, not in a hospital bed beside him." He nodded, and I could see the weight of those words landing in his heart. That day, he left with more than a reduced fine. He left with guidance and perhaps a deeper sense of responsibility. What I am saying is this: every case is an opportunity. It is not always about delivering punishment or forgiveness. It is about delivering perspective, about planting seeds that may grow into wisdom. And when you sit in judgment, you must remember that your words may echo in a person's life long after the courtroom doors have closed. That is power. That is responsibility. And that is why numbness, the temptation to treat every case as just another file, is the most dangerous trap of all. Now let me return to the case of the elderly woman and her daughter with cancer. What struck me most was not simply her pain, but the quiet dignity with which she carried it. She stood there, frail, yet unbroken, and even in her trembling voice there was the unspoken strength of a mother's love. And as I dismissed her case, I realized something profound. Mercy does not only bless the receiver, it transforms the giver, was changed that day. I understood more deeply than ever before that the law is not merely a system of rules, it is a living bridge between order and compassion. And every time we cross that bridge, we must choose which side we lean toward. For my juniors who may one day stand where I have stood, here is what I want you to remember. The law can guide your decisions, but only your humanity can give them. Meaning, if you are ever in doubt, ask yourself this: will my ruling bring healing, or will it bring only punishment? Sometimes punishment is necessary. Sometimes the strict application of the law is the only way to protect society. But other times mercy achieves more than severity ever could. The elderly woman reminded me of that. The young boy reminded me of that. And countless others have reminded me over the years. There was once a man who appeared before me, and when I read his record, I saw a long list of violations. To many, he would have appeared incorrigible, a man who simply didn't respect the rules. But when I spoke to him, I discovered something different. He wasn't careless, he was homeless. His car was not a vehicle of convenience, it was his shelter. His tickets were not acts of defiance, they were the byproducts of survival. And so once again, I had a choice: to enforce the letter of the law or to recognize the story behind the violations. I dismissed several of his fines, not because the law was irrelevant, but because compassion was more urgent. And I connected him with local services that could help him find stability. What was the result? Months later, he returned, not to face another violation, but to thank me. He had found housing, and he was rebuilding his life. That day, I learned something I wish every judge would hold close. Sometimes, justice is not about how strictly you enforce the law, but how much faith you place in a person's ability to change. When I finally stepped away from the bench after decades of service, people often asked me, "Judge, do you miss it? Do you miss the courtroom, the routine, the authority?" And I'll be honest with you, at first, I did. There is a rhythm to that life, a sense of purpose that seeps into your bones. Every morning, the docket is waiting. Every case is a new story. Every face is a reminder that life, in all its struggles, continues to flow through those courtroom doors. But as the days of retirement settled in, something surprising happened. I didn't feel emptiness. I felt gratitude, because retirement is not an ending, it is a mirror. It forces you to look back at all the years you have lived, and it
asks, what did you truly leave behind?
In those quiet mornings, sipping coffee by the window, I often think of the countless faces that stood before me. Some came trembling, some came angry, some came broken, and sometimes they left lighter than when they came. That, to me, is the
measure of a life in service, and not the titles, not the robes, not even the rulings,
but the difference you make in the silent corners of someone else's life. One woman once wrote me a letter after her case. She had been fined for a parking violation, but I had dismissed it when I learned she was struggling to care for her disabled husband. In her letter, she didn't talk about money or the relief of avoiding a fine. She wrote, "Judge, you saw me, you really saw me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt human again. Do you see? That is the legacy we leave, not just verdicts, but moments where someone feels seen, heard, and valued." To my juniors who may still be early in their careers, I say this: remember that your authority is not a shield to protect yourself from people. It is a bridge to reach them. Do not mistake retirement for silence. In truth, retirement only amplifies the voices of the past. Every choice you make, every word you speak, will echo into your memory one day. And when you look back, you will not measure your career by how many cases you closed, but by how many hearts you opened. Let me share another memory, one that came to me recently. A man appeared before me for failing to pay a parking ticket. He looked weary, his clothes worn, his face lined with exhaustion. But what struck me most was the way he avoided eye contact, as if ashamed of even standing there. When I asked why he hadn't paid the ticket, he hesitated. Finally, he said, "Judge, I had to choose. I could either pay the fine or I could buy groceries for my kids." The courtroom went still. In that moment, I wasn't thinking of the city's revenue or the fine schedule. I was thinking of his children, their empty plates, their hungry eyes. I dismissed the fine, yes, but I also told him, "Feed your kids. They need you more than this city needs your money." He broke down right there in front of everyone, and when he finally composed himself, he said, "Thank you, Judge. No one's ever cared enough to say that to me." That story has followed me into retirement. Why? Because it reminds me of something I fear too many forget. Justice is not meant to crush the powerless, it is meant to protect them. When I sit in my chair now, far from the bench, I think about the world we are leaving to the next generation of judges, and I ask myself, are we teaching them to protect or to punish? To see or to overlook? My answer, my hope is this: if my juniors remember even one thing from my years, let it be that true justice wears two robes, one woven of law and one woven of compassion. You see, retirement gives you clarity. On the bench, you are caught in the noise, cases, procedures, deadlines. But once you step away, all that remains are the voices that truly mattered. And those voices remind you that people will forget the exact fine, the exact ruling, even the exact words. But they will never forget how you made them feel. And isn't that the essence of a meaningful life? Not in how much authority we wield, but in how deeply we touch the hearts of those around us. There is a saying I often share with my juniors: the law teaches you what you can do. Compassion teaches you what you should do. I have lived long enough to know that the world will always need both. Too much law without compassion makes the world harsh. Too much compassion without law makes the world unstable. The art, the calling of a judge, is to hold both in balance. Retirement has not silenced that calling. It has made it louder, because now with every sunrise I remember, I may no longer wear the robe, but I still carry the responsibility of example. To my juniors, I say this with all the sincerity of my years. Do not chase after fame or power or the appearance of strength. Instead, chase after moments of truth, moments where you can look into the eyes of another human being and know you gave them dignity. Because when the years pass and your robe is folded away, those moments will be your true inheritance, and trust me, they will be worth more than any title or accolade. Sometimes, in retirement, I close my eyes and I see the courtroom again. The wooden bench, the hum of anticipation, the anxious faces waiting for their names to be called. And then I hear myself asking the simplest of questions. Tell me your story, because that was always the key. Behind every violation, behind every mistake, there was a story. And when you listen to those stories, not just with your ears, but with your heart, you discover the true meaning of justice. When I sit by the window in my retirement, watching the sun sink low across the horizon, I often think of the sunsets I witnessed inside the courtroom. Not literal ones, of course, but the endings of chapters in people's lives. Every day in that chamber, someone's old life was ending and a new one was about to begin. A young man standing before me, his record already stained, desperate for a second chance, a mother weighed down by responsibilities she could barely carry, an immigrant whose English faltered, but whose dignity was unshakable. Each of them brought with them a sunset, and perhaps, if treated with compassion, a sunrise. I recall a boy, barely in his 20s, brought in for reckless driving. He had been racing through the streets, endangering not only his life, but the lives of everyone around him. The officers who brought him in were firm, almost angry, because they had seen too many tragedies that began with the same recklessness. When I asked him why he had been driving so fast, he admitted with tears in his eyes that he had just lost his job and had been rejected from another interview. He said, "Judge, I felt like I was useless. I wanted to feel in control of something, even if it was just the gas pedal. I could have punished him harshly. The law allowed it. The city demanded it. But instead, I gave him community service and ordered him to speak at a local high school about the dangers of reckless driving. Months later, I received a letter from that very high school. They said the students had never been so attentive, never so moved as when that young man spoke. He had told them, 'I was one mistake away from destroying not just my life, but the lives of others.' Don't wait for a judge to tell you that before you listen." That young man found purpose not in defiance, but in redemption. And to this day, I think of him whenever I watch the sky darken, because sometimes a sunset is only a preparation for the dawn. This is what I want my juniors to know. Justice is not about finality, it is about transformation. The law closes a case, yes, but compassion opens a future. Do not forget this, because in the silence of retirement, it is not the gavels you will remember, it is the lives that turned because you cared enough to see their humanity. Let me tell you another story. An older gentleman once stood before me, charged with multiple violations for failing to maintain his property. The city wanted him fined heavily, perhaps even evicted. His house had fallen into disrepair, peeling paint, broken shutters, a yard overtaken by weeds. When I asked him why he had neglected his home, he lowered his head and confessed, "Judge, I lost my wife last year. She used to care for everything. The
garden, the little things. After she passed, I just didn't have the heart. I see the house now, and all I feel is her absence. The city saw an eyesore."
I saw grief. I suspended his fines and instead connected him with a community group that volunteered to restore his home. Weeks later, I drove by his street. His yard was blooming with flowers. The shutters were painted anew. And standing on the porch was the same man, smiling, waving at neighbors again. You see, justice cannot always be measured in penalties. Sometimes, justice is restoring not a house, but a soul. In retirement, these memories visit me like old friends. Each one whispers a truth. The robe we wear does not make us judges, our humanity does. If you, my juniors, ever feel tempted to hide behind the law, remember this. The law is a tool, not a shield. It is meant to serve, not to distance behind.
Every statute is a person. Behind every fine is a family. Behind every ruling is a ripple that spreads farther than you can imagine. Now, I must confess something to you.
Retirement, while peaceful, carries with it a strange weight. It is the weight of wondering, did I do enough? Did I leave the world kinder than I found it? Sometimes that question keeps me awake at night. But then I remember the faces. The mother who whispered thank you, the father who could buy groceries instead of paying a fine, the boy who found redemption in telling his story, the widower whose house and heart bloomed again, and I think perhaps that is enough. Perhaps we are not meant to change the whole world, but simply to change the worlds of those we meet. My friends, retirement is not a curtain falling, it is a spotlight shifting. There comes a moment in every life when the gavel falls for the last time, when the robe, once heavy with responsibility, is folded and laid to rest, when the seat you occupied becomes filled by another, younger, eager, ready to carry forward the torch. For me, that moment has come, and as I sit here, an old man at 96 years old, I look back not with regret, but with gratitude. My juniors, let me tell you the truth. The law is a stern master. It demands precision, obedience, and strength. But the people demand something far greater. They demand humanity. Throughout my years on the bench, I have seen both sides of humanity. I have seen anger, defiance, and arrogance. But I have also seen humility, sacrifice, and love so deep it moved me to tears. I remember a mother who sold her wedding ring just to pay for her son's medicine. I remember a teenager who admitted to his mistakes and asked not for forgiveness, but for the chance to prove himself worthy again. I remember an old veteran, trembling in his uniform, apologizing for a broken taillight he could not afford to fix. Each of these people left me with something no book of law ever could. They left me with truth. And truth, my juniors, is this: justice without mercy is nothing more than cruelty in disguise. When you stand in that courtroom, you may think you are holding power, but the truth is you are holding a mirror to your own soul, because every decision you make reflects not only who the defendant is, but who you are. If you choose only punishment, you will leave behind only fear. But if you choose compassion, you will leave behind hope. And hope, my friends, outlives us all. In retirement, I have discovered that the echoes of my decisions reach farther than I ever imagined. Letters arrive still from people whose names I have long forgotten. They tell me that one moment of kindness changed their life, that one reprieve gave them courage to fight another day, that one soft word reminded them they were not alone. It humbles me, because when you are young, you believe legacy is built in stone, but when you are old, you learn it is built in hearts, and hearts, unlike stone, live forever. So, to those who come after me, to the young judges, to the guardians of tomorrow, hear me. Do not let the weight of the robe make you blind to the humanity beneath it. Do not let the letter of the law silence the spirit of mercy. Do not let the pursuit of justice become the abandonment of compassion, because at the end of your career, it will not be the verdicts you recall, it will be the faces, the trembling voice, the whispered thank you, the tears shed not from punishment but from relief. That is the true power of service. That is the true meaning
of justice. And now, as I close this chapter, I leave you with this image. A sunset stretches across the sky.
The day is ending, yes, but look closer. Beyond the horizon, light begins to rise again. The sun does not die, it rests, only to be born anew. So it is with us. My time in the courtroom has ended, but my lessons live on. In you, in those you serve, in the choices you will make when no one is watching but your own conscience. Carry that torch, do not let it dim. Let it shine not just in the halls of justice, but in the quiet streets, in the hearts of those who need it most. And when your own sunset comes, may you too find peace in knowing you chose compassion over and over again. For myself, I am content, because I know now what I did not know as a young man, that true justice is not the law we enforce, but the humanity we embrace. And if I have left behind even a single seed of compassion in the world, then my work was not in vain. So as I say, goodbye to the bench, to the courtroom, to the years of service that shaped me. I do not say farewell. I say thank you. Thank you to the people who trusted me with their stories. Thank you to the city that allowed me to serve. And thank you to life itself for teaching me that mercy is the highest form of justice. The gavel has fallen for the last time, but the echoes will remain. And those echoes, my friends, belong now to you.